Books, books, books. What are all these books? Well, that's why I am here to talk to you today. My name is Chris Sarkletti, author of See, Live, Eat, and I'm here for the first of 4 successive weekly videos about traveling like a local. Today we want to talk about guidebooks, about what's the best guidebook to get for you and what's important to get a guidebook. To start with, the fact that we're talking about guidebooks is a good thing. Because if you've picked up any of these, you're on the right path. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of internet sites like TripAdvisor and whatnot that provide meaningful and good advice on traveling. But I do think it's important to have something in your hand as you're walking amongst the place that you go that provides you that input into what you're going to do. So what are the best books to use to travel like a local? We have many options here. Let's start with a couple here. What's your style of travel? Is it high-end? I'm into traveling like a local. That doesn't matter where you stay and whatnot, but I'm more into traveling like a local. We have a few here. This is a Warsaw guidebook, this Eyewitness Travel Guide. When I first started to travel, you know, people love these things. They have such detail and they're beautiful and whatnot. But I find that, you know, they provide some good, meaningful input. But at the end of the day, I don't think this is really what traveling like a local is. And this is more like a reference within a guidebook. It has very few restaurant recommendations. I don't feel like it's updated much. And it has very few hotel recommendations. What it does have is great detailed information about specifics. This is an Old Town Square in Warsaw, Poland, where it points out specific streets. It's good for that. But I would say that this is a non-winner for your primary guidebook, but maybe a good reference guidebook. Korean for Dummies. Well, this is a language guidebook. You need to get these, especially if you're going to Korea, where the level of English spoken is not at the same of other countries I have visited. Korea is a great country to visit, but that's not what this is about. These types of books like this are very minimal. You know, they provide a little bit of historical context, and they provide some good language context, which is needed in countries like Korea, that I've traveled to, like countries like Korea, Brazil, just to some extent Mexico, in certain parts of Europe. So, I mean, something like this is good, but again, this is not really where I get into in-depth travel like local guidebook. Let's go to something here. Fedora's. Florence, Tuscany, Umbria. This gets into more of like a real guidebook. It has, the weak point of this book is historical context. That's not to say that it doesn't have some redeeming qualities. This is more geared towards a mid to high level traveler, in my opinion. It has solid restaurant suggestions, good hotel suggestions, and some good suggestions on what to do and what not. There are things like the best 3 days to spend, the top 3 days to spend in this location or another are pretty good. I mean, I think this is decent. This is more towards of a higher end traveler. I would say that it's not necessarily in the local travel, whatever that means, that I'm trying to propose. But that said, this is a pretty good guidebook overall. Now I'm going to get into what I like the most. Because why not? If I'm going to end on that, I got to go where I like the most. So let's start with a couple here. Let's go with The Lonely Planet. Lonely Planet is a good guidebook. It's pretty reliable. It covers a lot of ground. They really have Lonely Planets for everywhere. And there's my favorite guidebook, which I'm going to get to in a minute, Rough Guide. Lonely Planet covers more areas than Rough Guide. Not by far, but it does cover a few more. So Lonely Planet, this one's of Bangkok, but it could be of others. I have one from Southern Africa over here. Lonely Planet really covers, I think, things more on a bare bones. This is closer to your backpacker type travel book than any other one, even more than the Rough Guide, more than the other one I'm going to talk about. This is your backpacker guidebook, more so than any other. It has good historical context. It really gets into facts for the visitor, which are important, and Fedora's gets into that a little bit too, but it really talks about like the things you need to be concerned of, the shots you need to get, You know, for example, if you're traveling to a certain location, you may need to get certain vaccinations. It talks about that. It talks about crime. It talks about money. It talks about ATMs. It really covers a lot of this. So this is very good. Again, Fedora's covers some of that also, and they do a decent job. But for my money, Lonely Planet and Rough Guide are the best at this. So this really does a good, I really like the historical context in here. They really give you a good historical context. And for my money, in my mind, having some historical context for the place you go to is worth the investment. If you're willing to spend the money and the time to travel to a location, you should be willing to spend a couple hours, 2 hours, 4 hours, whatever it may be, to read about the context of that country, to understand the food that you're going to encounter, the culture you're going to encounter, and that's going to help enrich your experience. It's going to help you understand why this place is what it is, or is what you perceive it to be. And I think that's important, and I think it's one of the essence of enjoying your trip. Last couple. So, before I get to the Rough Guide, I'm going to talk a little bit about Rick Steves. I'm a big fan of Rick Steves. There's a couple here with Spain and Portugal from 2000 and Portugal from 2007. So Rick Steves really sells himself on Europe through the back door. He certainly goes to major towns. So in Portugal, he's going to go to Lisbon or Porto or whatnot. But he also goes to the fishing village that you may not know of, another university town you may not know of, etc. Rick Steves does a really good job on suggesting reasonably priced hotels, kind of mid-range, decent restaurant recommendations, decent historical recommendations, excellent art descriptions. When he goes to an art museum, he gives you a full-on description of the paintings and whatnot that really takes you through an hour and a half in that museum, really pointing out specific details of the great paintings. But I think Rick Steves he's a great ambassador for travel. I'm a big fan of his, and I think he really does a good job on providing some good input for local travel. He's one of the best. He really only does focus on Europe. He's delved into the Middle East a little bit. I believe in Turkey and potentially Iran. But for the most part, he really focuses on Europe. But for Europe, he is a good guidebook. And he's also good for families. This is a very good family guidebook. Lastly, but not leastly, the Rough Guide. Rough Guide is my favorite guidebook. Partially, it has, I think, great historical context. In every one of these, you're going to get 60 to 80 pages of rich history. It goes by century, it goes by decade, it really gets into explaining what a certain place is or what it is not. It talks about some of the political strife or non-strife, or going from one president and whatnot to another. It has rich text in the back, and in terms of the biodiversity, certain books that it references if you want to read more deeply about a certain area of the country, or invest more time in reading about things. Really great. It really gets into great suggestions. I think the restaurant suggestions are excellent. You can't really go wrong with this. I've used numerous hotel recommendations here, and the guide to go to a certain area and whatnot is fantastic also. I'm a big fan of the Rough Guide, and to me, this is the best guidebook for traveling like a local. They have numerous versions of the Rough Guide, and I recommend all the books that I suggested. But as you saw, the Rough Guide is my favorite. Thanks for your time today.